Okay, hello everyone. I'm Chris Graw, partner with Carson Wealth, an independent wealth management firm whose mission is to be the most trusted for financial advice. Today, I'm speaking with Mark Salisbury, co-founder and CEO of TuitionFit. Mark has a PhD in higher education from the University of Iowa. He most recently served as administrator, researcher, and teacher at Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois. Mark has recently been interviewed by the New York Times just in this last month about the future of higher education. And in the era of COVID-19 and TuitionFit, his company, which he has co-founded, I should say, has been featured in Forbes and CNBC. So welcome, Mark. Thanks for joining us. I know as a father of 4 kiddos, I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. I thought I'd kick off just with some statistics that I found rather interesting from your TED Talk. So from 1979 to 2019, so 40 years of college costs have increased 1,332%, while the family income has only risen 359%. I found that really staggering. And then the second thing was over the past, say, 30 years or so, the sticker price for college tuition has risen about 97%. But the actual cost has only risen 50%, which is less than about $6,750 a year. So I'm just looking forward to peeling back that onion and talking about the sticker price versus actual price for college costs. So thanks for joining us, Mark. And if you don't mind, let's just dive right into the first question. So talk a little bit about this, how colleges and universities are responding to this situation with COVID-19.
Well, the snappy answer is not very well.
Okay.
This is just an incredibly difficult time for them. You know, colleges and universities, they're a lot like the restaurant business. It's a very thin margin and you're a one-trick pony. And so if you don't have tuition money coming in, if you don't have students on campus, you're in a lot of trouble. And what most colleges and universities know is they've got an endowment that looks like it's a big number, lots of zeros. But most of that endowment money has been given by families or foundations or organizations that have said, you're going to use that money for a very specific purpose. And they call that restricted money. And most endowments are mostly restricted money. So the colleges can't really dip into that backup money to pay the costs that now they have for faculty and staff salaries and all the other fixed costs that are built into running this thing. And you got no students, and you got all these kids that have gone home and you've sent them refunds for room and board. And the students are saying, you know what, I don't want to come back if you're just going to charge me what you normally charge me, but put classes online. And so the colleges realize that essentially they have to open in the fall, and they have to figure out a way to do it that still is safe, that still allows for people to feel confident in sending their kids off the campus. And there's a lot of unknowns, so they're really scrambling. And it wasn't like they were flush before this. They were in a lot of trouble before this thing happened. And higher education sort of looks like essentially 2 different groups. There's the institutions that have tons and tons of money, and then everybody else. And everybody else is looking at this thing going, uh-oh, we don't know what to do. We have to have people here. So we were already struggling to try to get people to come and pay whatever we'd ask them to pay, which is usually a lot less than the sticker price. But now it's a fire sale in some places.
So let's talk a little bit about the history of, just kind of the higher price tuition and where that was seen as maybe more valuable. And can you talk a little bit about that? And is that still true today?
Yeah, it's a great example of principles or ideas or theories that sort of catch on in the world of business and marketing that people sort of forget. They require a context in which they work, and they don't necessarily work all the time. So colleges and universities several decades ago said, yeah, we're kind of trying to figure out how to get more students to apply. Well, let's just set our price real high and say, it's really expensive to go here because it's really good. So a couple of schools that already had a decent reputation did that, and they saw their applications jump. So then everybody else said, well, if it worked for them, it'll work for us. And so really all of higher education embraced this idea that you set a real high price, and then whatever discounts you got to give, we'll just have a big scholarship pot that we can sort of take from. Zoom forward a couple of decades, and that idea isn't really working anymore because family income stayed relatively flat. And so the colleges say, well, we'll just give more and more scholarship money. And the public will still think we're great because our sticker price is high. Well, eventually the public went, that sticker price is just over the moon. And there's no way you're going to give me a 65% discount in order to get into my ballpark. So I'm not even going to bother to apply. Now colleges can't get enough applications. So now it's like, well, what are we going to do? And it's created a real problem for institutions. Yes, they built the model themselves, but once you buy into that idea of we're going to say that our price reflects our quality, you can't do that for a couple of decades and then go, oh, just kidding.
Yeah. So talk about this widening gap between the college cost and family incomes. And then, in addition to that, the sticker price versus actual price, I had no clue until I met you and learned about TuitionFit, that, you could negotiate, your price with college. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. There was a headline not too long ago that just said colleges won the marketing war. And the idea behind it was that colleges have made it so that the public just assumes that, yeah, it's really hard to get into colleges. And there's way more people trying to get in than the colleges have spots for. But the reality across higher education has shifted dramatically as really supply and demand has sort of played out. So to get back to the question about how all of this shifted, well, most people I think know that while certain parts of our families, the socioeconomic status, their incomes have gone up pretty dramatically, a large proportion of the American populace, their family incomes have stayed relatively flat for several decades. But colleges and universities still need to get far more than just those folks to go to college, right? And there's been this big push that everybody needs some sort of higher education after high school. So what colleges did was they just said, well, we'll just give more and more aid out to the folks who don't fit into that real upper echelon of income. And they've had to just keep doing that over the course of several decades as they kept increasing their sticker prices. And so you've got this sort of growing financial aid pot that's just sort of making up the difference between where families are and that sort of mythical sticker price. So when colleges started to get on this higher price, higher discount idea, it was still a time in which the number of students graduating from high school was growing. Colleges thought, well, we're always going to have more demand than there is supply. Underneath that, though, as family income stayed flat, colleges started to realize we're having to give more and more aid to get these people to come to our schools. So we're going to have to shift our financial model to more of a big box store sort of framework. And so we're going to have to make our money on growing the size of each freshman class. But underneath that, colleges are making less and less money off of each freshman class. And so they're saying, you know what, we just have to get more kids every year. That's how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Well, about 2012, we stopped getting more and more kids graduating from high school every year. And that number started to flatten out. So now that whole big box store model is really in trouble, right? Because there's just not more kids to go to college each year. And now the only way you're going to get more is if you're going to get more and more students that wouldn't have gone to college to now go. Those students also tend to be ones that are coming from lower income, so they need more financial aid. And you can see now this whole system starts to creak and groan a bit because it's not really going to work if you don't have more and more kids graduating from high school every year. So now there's way more supply than there is demand. And that sets up the ability to negotiate. So now you can go to schools, and schools are just saying, like, look, we're not going to make any money off of freshmen because we got to discount this so much, and we just got to get them in the door. And we will give them a dollar amount for your financial aid, but we'll increase tuition every year after this. So we'll make our money on sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And freshmen are just sort of a lost leader, but we got to get them in the door. Otherwise, we'll never get a chance to make that money. So what that opens up is the ability for families to say to a college, look, we can't pay this, but if you can give me another couple $1,000s, I think we can make that work. It's gotten to the point now where many colleges and universities, especially schools that are sort of off the national radar, the first offer they give you, not their best offer. So you can absolutely negotiate with about 80% of the colleges and universities out there. Harvard's not going to negotiate. Flagship universities in a given state probably aren't going to negotiate in a given year. But small colleges that are regional public institutions that usually have a direction in the front of their name, absolutely.
I would guess too, with, the thought that millennials are, getting married later, kind of establishing their home later, having potentially children later, that this supply demand issue will, I would guess, kind of be an ongoing thing at this point?
Yes. Well, come about 2024, 2025, count back 17 years from that, and you get to 2007.
Yep.
I heard, rumor has it, that we had a huge recession about that time.
We did.
Yes. So birth rates shrunk dramatically right there, and they have stayed shrunk as millennials have gotten into having a young adult life and first job, second job, thinking about married, those folks have, for a lot of reasons, and one of them is the sort of crazy student loan mess we got ourselves into. They're not having as many kids, and they're having them later. So we don't see anything changing in terms of the number of kids graduating from high school. We see a cliff at about 2024. It drops like a stone and stays dropped until the early 2030s, where we thought we were going to start to see a little bump, and then we had COVID. So the numbers for the colleges don't work in their favor unless a whole bunch of colleges and universities go under in the next several years, and that might start to balance the equation a little bit. But even then, the public is in a position of power just on the supply-demand balancing scales right now.
Yeah.
And the thing they don't have is they didn't know you could negotiate. They didn't know that the actual prices are oftentimes 2/3 what the sticker price is. They don't know all this stuff. And so you get your information from, well, what was it like when your parents went to school?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, all that information is no longer relevant.
In my work as a financial planner, I've always kind of coined the phrase that, financial planning isn't a product, it's a process.
Right.
And, I was really fascinated to hear in your TED Talk as well that you kind of said the problem with higher education isn't price, it's the process. And I think that kind of leads us to, talking about TuitionFit, which is the company you co-founded and are now CEO of. And so talk a little bit about how TuitionFit got started. What issue is TuitionFit trying to solve?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I saw in my years in higher education was, families are trying to decide a series of decisions throughout that process. You start with, 4,500 colleges and universities around the country. And then you're deciding, okay, which ones am I going to look more seriously at? And very quickly you're down to, maybe there's 100 or so, and you couldn't name them, but you sort of know, I want to stay in the Midwest and I want to go to a small college, let's just say. And there's hundreds of small colleges in the Midwest. So then it's, well, which ones? Well, I want, this major, and I want it to be within so many miles of home or so many hours drive. you do whatever you're going to do. Maybe it's the other way around. It's got to be at least 5 hours away, because if mom and dad are coming, I got to have time to clean my room. Whatever the logic here is. But at each of those stages, what was happening for the public was they knew that it's expensive, and they knew that it's a risky calculus, because if you get it wrong, your family life could be permanently altered by the kind of debt you might end up in, right? So from the very beginning of the process, the family's saying, look, I only want to look at schools that I'm ultimately going to be able to afford. And at those earlier stages of the process, there's no good data that really tells you, okay, that's a school that I can afford, that's a school I can't afford, because the difference between the sticker price and the actual price is tens of thousands of dollars. And depending on the school that you actually apply to, your price could be somewhere on either side of that average, tens of thousands of dollars on either side of that average, and you just don't know. So the public was incredibly frustrated by this. And it just seemed to me that it was time to say, look, we all have individual slices of the data. High school seniors get award letters every year, and in those award letters are the actual prices they're getting. I know from my work in higher ed that setting price is actually a much more straightforward process than the whole notion of applications and admission. So if we know how to colleges set their prices, we get that information from a student, that award letter from the student, zoom that out by a couple of thousand, and then you've got essentially a Kelley Blue Book for college prices. So that's what we did, was just say, let's create a tool that gives the public information and power to be an engaged and informed consumer with real agency, so that you can find the colleges that you can afford, and you don't miss anybody way early in the process. It's overwhelming, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I go to Walmart or Target and you just need a pair of socks, and there's a giant wall of socks.
Yeah.
And this is called choice overload. This is a very typical thing that psychologists study all the time. And when people get in that position, you just grab the first socks you see and get out of there, because it's a stressful thing. Or you do what I do and wear sandals for 9 months, right? Like, you just like, I'm out. Like, I don't even want to. And that's the way that lots of families engage the college search, because they've been getting brochures for 2 years, and they look at those brochures and go, I can't tell the difference. I don't know which one's which. They all have a history major. Like, how can I, like, yeah, there's a kid sitting on a bench happily, and there's another student in a sports team. Everybody's got that. Like, I don't know. So
Yeah.
price becomes a real important metric to start to narrow your choices by, and there's no way to do that. So that's why we built what we built.
I found it interesting too, like there's an inequality issue too. I guess I forgot, it does cost money to apply for college, right? So if you've got a lower income family, they might apply to 3 to 5 schools, where if you have a higher income family, they can pay for, the 50 to 100 applications to these schools to see what comes back, right? And so
Right.
You're also kind of helping balance that equation as well.
Yeah, it's really true. There's so many things embedded into this system that they sort of look like, nothing against old golf country clubs, but it sort of looks like an application to place to a country club, that if you have applied, it's a given that you can afford it, right? Like, if you're applying to a real selective club, just the fact that to apply and that you've been invited, money's not an issue. But that's not the case for college, and that's not the case for lots of people. So you're right. The reason that students apply to lots of schools is, one, that they have the money to be able to do that, because college applications are now typically $75 or $100. And it usually makes sense to go visit that campus, and that's not cheap.
Yeah.
Gas, take the time off from work. So, it's not inexpensive to do this stuff. The whole idea here is it does provide some equality, equalizing this, these gaps, while at the same time empowering the whole buyer side of this transaction to start to bring the power that they should have to this marketplace, right?
Yeah.
Supply and demand stuff, again, Econ 101, right? Like if there's way more supply than there is demand, prices should be coming down.
Mm-hmm.
Prices haven't been coming down, and there's been a glut of supply. Well, why? Because the process that we have always abided by holds back price until the very end, and so people make decisions really based on emotion without knowing what they're getting themselves into. And then at the end of it, way too often families are in a position where they end up borrowing more than they really had planned on, or paying more than they wanted to pay because they think, I got three prices sitting in front of me and those are my only choices, so I guess I'm stuck with it.
Yeah. Let's talk about TuitionFit a little bit, because it seems like, you know, we have the answer. It's just like accumulating this data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really up to us as the general public it's this sharing of information, right? That really helps balance this equation. So talk a little bit about TuitionFit. What's that process look like? You know, if I want to use TuitionFit for my family, you know, what do I need to do? What kind of information do I have access to?
Yeah, we tried to make it a really simple process because it really does require the public to say, you know what, I want to fix this, so I'm going to get involved. The way that colleges organize prices is a really pretty straightforward matrix where they have academic merit on the vertical and financial need on the horizontal. And then whenever a student applies, they look at, okay, the student's got this test score and this GPA. And then the student's got this EFC, expected family contribution. It's the result of filling out the FAFSA. Essentially, once they do that, then they have a matrix that says, okay, if you have this test score and high school GPA and this EFC, this is the price we're going to offer you. If you get a different test score and a different EFC, that price we're going to offer you. So when a student signs up to TuitionFit, we just ask them, what was your test score? What's your high school GPA? And then what's your EFC? And if you've got one, plug it in from the FAFSA. If you don't, you can use an EFC estimator. There's a whole bunch of those online. Or if you know you're fairly well off and you just want to plug in $80,000, even though that's not, you would never do that. That's where fine. Because once you get to that point, colleges don't really parse at that point. And then you just take a picture of your financial aid award offer and you upload it to TuitionFit. And that's it. Then what we do is we verify that it's a real letter. Then we redact all of the private information on that letter. So any name and address, anything that might be a named scholarship that somebody could then Google and say, oh, the Johnson Scholarship at School X was for a student from this county who wants to do this major. We'll redact anything that would even get somebody close to being able to identify who received that award letter. Then we show it to you and say, are you good with these redactions? And if you're not good with it, then we can't put it into the system. You might say, hey, could you redact this other word here? Because that feels like a little, great, fine, no problem. Because it's a trust exercise here ultimately in sharing that stuff. Then once you've approved it, then it goes into the system. And now because you've shared an award letter or more than one, which is always better because we'll help you sort of compare award letters for free, because you shared, now you get to see all of the other offers that have been shared by students or families just like you, the same academics and same financial need. And now you get to put your prices in context and you get to see, wait a minute, there's all these other kids that have gotten offers from schools that I don't think are all that different, and they're 10 grand less than what I'm looking at.
Right.
I'm going to do something about that, right? Or if you're lucky, wow, I got an awesome deal. I feel way more better about taking it, right?
Right.
Same kind of thing you get when you go to Car Gurus or when you go to Kelley Blue. I mean, the same kind of thing that we're used to doing in so many other shopping experiences, you can now do a TuitionFit.
And how many people have actually uploaded to TuitionFit now?
Just this year, we've had over 5,000 students from all over the country, really of all different types, upload award letters. So we now have a data set that is closing in on 6,500, 7,000 prices and offers from colleges and universities all over the country.
Yeah.
And what that allows people to do is just start to put their prices in context. You just give the consumer power.
Yeah, I'm even thinking, if I'm a good student, I've worked hard, I've got a decent GPA, even if I want to go to a particular school, at least now I know what, I get that award letter and say, I can come back to them even and say, hey, I see that everybody else is paying $5,000 less, how about you give me a better deal, right? I mean, man, what powerful information to have in the consumer's hands.
People change the way they think about this when you put it in concrete terms.
Yeah.
Value is dependent on knowing price.
Yeah.
Right? Because everyone's value is different based on what their price is. So that is what's happened with TuitionFit. And for people who use it, it completely changes the nature of the conversation they're having about college, and they're able to make much more informed decisions about what they do.
There's been a lot of debate over, what is a 4-year degree, the value of that. Has that changed? Is it still worth it to go to college? I mean, can you kind of speak, what's your opinion on that right now?
Yeah, I mean, it really has gotten to be a much more complicated question.
Sure.
And it was sort of bubbling up. And then when COVID hit and so many students were doing their classes online at home, it really pulled the curtain back to people saying, you know what, I really want to engage this question because I'm not sure. So generally, yes, college is absolutely worth the investment. Yeah. Generally. The reality, though, for individuals is that you need to be much more savvy about which college you go to and what price you pay, what you want to study, what career you think you want to go to, if you have a clue about that at all. So there's absolutely some importance in really being able to think about the relationship between the price that the school's asking you to pay and the value that you get out of it, compared to if that's all that different from what another school would ask you to pay, and the value being relatively similar. And then add to that, to what degree is the young person capable and willing to then make the most of that environment once they get there.
What is college inflating at? I mean, is there any guidance there, we could help our clients with?
There was a stretch over the past 15 years or so where colleges really were very liberal in how much they increased their sticker price. Now, that has started to change a bit because the PR that came from that started to get bad, right? The problem now is that there's several schools, and more every year, that are doing this thing called tuition reset, where they just say, you know what, our sticker price is 80 grand. Nobody's paying more than 60. We get hammered now for being at 80 when we used to think we got all this kudos for it. So the heck with it. We'll just drop our sticker price down to 40. And then underneath, we'll shrink all our scholarships. So everybody's going to pay the same what they were paying before on average. But now we look like we did this great thing. So if you are working with families where you're using sticker price, that really isn't necessarily the number that you want to use. Instead, you might want to go and just look at how average net prices have increased over time and use that as your metric. You want to look at how actual prices, the net prices, are moving, not the sticker price.
Yeah. Well, hey, Mark, thanks for a great discussion today. I really appreciate you're really an advocate for, empowering people, and appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah. If people have any questions, they can sure to come to the site. It's tuitionfit.org.
Yep.
Or they can email me at mark@tuitionfit.org. I'm glad to answer any questions that advisors have.
I also just wanted to put a plug in if our listeners want to go out and look at your TED Talk. If they just put in Mark Salisbury, the simplest way to bring down the cost of college, I think was the title of the talk. So,
right.
And then for all the listeners too, if you'd like to get in contact with me or our firm at Carson Wealth, my email is cgraw, that's GRAW, @carsonwealth.com. You can also check out our website, at www.carsonwealth.com. Thanks again, Mark. Really appreciate your time.
Great to be with you.